All right, everyone. Welcome back to another Paperboy podcast interview. I'm your host, Brandon Marlowe. Each interview is a companion to the podcast I created around the same topic and will aim to shed further light or give a different look at the issue. So make sure you check out this month's research piece, episode 1, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Today, we're going to be discussing how we can learn to cut through propaganda, how we can wake people up in this time of peak polarization, and what we can do for ourselves and our families in the time of COVID 1984. I can't think of a better person to help us break down all that and more than our next guest, Ricky Varandas. Ricky is the host of the Ripple Effect podcast, which is a laid-back, long-form, honest conversation between Ricky and his guests. And the thing that I love about it is it really feels like Ricky is there to learn as much as the listener. Ricky's also one of the OGs of the Union of the Unwanted, a collection of alternative media that aims to tackle important issues of the day, from censorship to vaccines to human trafficking. I've really enjoyed that show since it's come together, and I look forward to it every other week. So let's get to it. Ricky, thanks so much for doing this, man. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for being with me. I'm used to saying that. I'm not used to thanks for having me, is what I meant.
Absolutely, man. It's a pleasure. So, I mean, just since I've never had you on before, I thought we could do a little bit of background. What was it that first woke you up to the official narrative kind of being bullshit?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think all of us that, I guess for lack of a better term, that have been red-pilled or see things deeper than the average person, we're always curious on like how that happened to other people. But I've spent a lot of time also trying to figure out how that's happened for myself. Like, what was it? What was the trigger? Was it a documentary? Was it a artist? Was it, what was it? Something to do with the way I was brought up? And I'm not sure there's a straightforward answer. I think it was, in many cases, it's probably a combination of things, which kind of goes into why I think long form conversations and talking about maybe what sometimes may be controversial issues are worth having, because you never know which conversation sticks with people and what may change their perspective, what exactly ends up being that thing that kind of chips away at their narrative or the way they perceive the world. And I think we all help and contribute with that as we have these conversations and talk to people we know or whatnot. And with myself, I think a lot of it was probably a little bit of music. It was a little bit of we kind of talked about it before we started recording, just how when you're a musician, you spend a lot of time analyzing how you feel and why you feel a certain way, and you're trying to tap into certain emotions or whatnot. And and I think those same tools and those same, I guess, exercises that you use to kind of figure out how you feel about yourself and your life and those type of things, you kind of start using that to understand the world around you. And I was also always super skeptical. I didn't like rules growing up. Even now with my kids, I'm kind of like that, where I'm like, unless it's like something where they're going to hurt themselves or somebody else, I'm kind of like, yeah, who cares? Like my wife would be like, you're just going to let them do that? I'm like, oh, who cares? They're having a popsicle at 9:00 at night. Who cares? It's like, it's not, I'm like, I'll be hard on them when it's really necessary, and because when I was a kid, I remembered that I didn't like rules, and I know that contribute to me questioning things. I know that contribute to me, not just going along with the herd, but asking why do we have to do this, or why is this acceptable, why is that not acceptable, or why do we believe this person, and or whatever it may be. And but I can't, I've tried to really pinpoint what made me that way, or what was my first impressions, the earliest memories of me really questioning things to try to figure out. And I'm not sure, because it's like the chicken and egg. I'm always like, well, was I questioning things first, and then it led me down these rabbit holes that, for lack of a better term, conspiracy theorists, documentaries and alternative media and all this stuff, or did documentaries and all those things lead me to question things? It's like, I don't know what came first or whatnot. I like to believe that it was me kind of being skeptical of things and questioning things and always wanting to go against the grain. I remember as a kid in school, always, a teacher would say something, and I'd always have some smart ass response about like, well, why do we have to do it that way? Or why is this important or whatever? But I really truly think that artists and musicians and creative people in general are probably more likely to question things and question the narrative and dissect things and try to really understand things for what they are. And then a lot of other things, like we talked about 1 minute silence. I had the singer on my show Fear Factory. Those are two artists that were real influential in my upbringing, and kind of their music kind of made me look at things from different perspectives or whatnot. And then movies like Loose Change, was one of them. Zeitgeist, Jason Bermas was one of my first ever guests. I think he was on like in the single digits. He was on really early episodes, and his documentary was so influential to myself and so many other people in regards to, like, it's not about it being factually 100% correct in every aspect of their opinions in that documentary, but it was about the fact that it planted the seed of doubt that maybe things aren't what they seem. And Zeitgeist did a similar thing. I remember giving out like having copies of Zeitgeist and giving them out to people. It's like, hey, you got to watch this, you got to watch this. And then if they're really religious people, I'm like, hey, fast forward the beginning and then go to the part, the rest of the part, because you might not even give the rest of it a chance because you might be offended by the beginning of it. But it really was about social control. Even the beginning of it, I think that was the point of Peter Joseph, was this idea of, like, through religion or through other means, there's ways of controlling the masses. And so I mean, it was documentaries, and podcast kind of became my my next love afterwards. I really loved the fact that it sounded like I could get honest discussions about interesting topics that I liked. I was stuck in, and I am still stuck in, like, the everyday life of, like, 9 to 5. My hours are 7 to 3 or 4, or whenever the hell I get out of work. But it's I was stuck in that routine, and then I was driving a lot, and the commuting it was one of those things where it just, why not do something valuable with that time? Why not do something that's worthwhile instead of just commuting and listening to the same old music? Even though I was a musician and loved music, I got into these podcasts, and Joe Rogan was one of them that really was the most influential one, because it was the one that had the most interesting topics. Because he was a comedian, he wasn't he didn't really seem to have a philosophy or agenda that he was pushing. And so I like that. I like that, and it was refreshing. When you put on the TV, when you read a newspaper, when you do anything else, you run into people who have agendas and are trying to sell you something or push something towards your direction. So it was nice to kind of just hear podcasts, and little by little, I'm like, you know what? I'm stuck in the grind of doing this. I don't really feel fulfilled. Let me do something in my life. Let me do something that's worthwhile. Let me do something to kind of, because I feel like something was missing. After I stopped playing music, I really did feel like something was missing in my life. Like I wasn't content with just going to work and buying material things to try to make you feel better or whatnot. I just, until this day, I still don't really like my full-time job, but this makes it worthwhile, and all the other things that I do make it worthwhile because I feel like I'm contributing something. And then I started doing podcasts with a buddy of mine who was my co-host at the time, and I'm just like, hey, you want to record us talking? And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? He's like, one, why? And two, like, who's going to want to listen to that? And I'm like, I don't know, but I think there's some value in it. I find value in hearing other people challenge and share ideas, and I think that we can do the same thing. And little by little, I got really lucky. I had some really generous guests that were willing to come on when I really had zero platform. Douglas Ruskoff comes to mind, Jason Bermas, James Corbett, Dan Carlin was on really early, Lee Camp, I think, also. So I got super lucky, and it just started building. And really, like I said, it was, I think, a little bit helped the fact that I already had microphones and a mixer, and I was playing around with Pro Tools, and then I knew how to work it more or less. And so it kind of made it for an easy transition. But if I wasn't doing that, I think I'd have to be doing something, because I just needed, there was a little bit of a desire to do something creative again. And there was also a desire to do something fulfilling in regards to, like, honestly trying to make a difference and trying to do something. And believe me, I had a lot of people who said, some people didn't even know what a podcast was at the time, because it was like 7 years ago. But other people were like, well, who's going to listen, and how big of a difference do you think you're really going to make, or whatnot? And now I get emails all the time. I get people hit me up on all my social media platforms and just tell me about how much they need my show or appreciate my show, because they're hearing the conversations they wish they could have in their personal life with friends of theirs. And I think that's a big aspect of podcasting. I think people kind of feel like, you know what, like I can't talk about these issues with friends of mine or family, and I don't feel like anybody else feels the same way I do. I just sound like Oasis, but so I think podcasts were that thing. They were that thing where it's like, oh shit, like these are people talking about the things I want to talk about, and saying things in the way that I would say them and feeling the same way I feel. And during the coronavirus thing, I mean, the lockdown, my show, and I think a lot of people who were kind of saying the same things and not afraid to go against the grain, their shows were blowing up because so many people needed that for psychological reasons. And I think a lot of people who were home, just stuck home, not, you know, stuck, most of the time we're stuck in especially in the East Coast, where I live in Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, like the whole New England area. People live such fast-paced lives. They don't have time to research. They don't have time to know what's going on in the world. And now they did. And I think, you know, I think that was probably why documentaries like Plandemic and so many other things were being suppressed, because people actually had time to research it. And if they could actually get access to that information, it might change the way they look at the world. And I think that's why there was such a huge effort in making sure that didn't happen, because it's like, well, no, people actually have time now to research, and people are Googling these terms, and people are looking into vaccines or Bill Gates or who, you know, Dr. Fauci's history or whatever. And, you know, I just went on a long rant, and I'm not sure if I even answered your question.
Oh man, that was perfect. And it was just, I wanted to touch on Joe Rogan real quick since you brought
Yeah.
him up. And I mean, he was kind of one of my first podcasts I was getting into as well. And one of the things I loved about him, and I still do in a sense, but it feels like he's a lot more like reserved now. Let's say, to put it nicely, right? You can tell that money is starting to factor in, and the weight of sponsorships is really starting to press on kind of the things you can. Anyway, I feel like he's able to say, or that he's willing to say, just in terms of it being like it's not even live anymore. They're doing it, you know, they're pre-taped and with the ability to edit and those sorts of things. It just feels like once you bring money into the situation, it changes things for the worse, no matter what. Which is why these podcasts are nice, like just the ability to have a conversation with you or people like you. And you know, it's just from a selfish perspective, it's like in my own life, my family, I can talk to. I've got a few close friends that I can talk to about this stuff, but I work in a huge place, and most people are going to take the shot immediately when it's out there, right? And that's just kind of the world that we live in. So yeah, I'm just really grateful to have you here, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on Rogan.
See, so I've had a lot of people on my show that have been on Rogan's show, and believe me, I'm with you, because he really was one of the first shows that I got obsessed with, that I really got into, and he exposed me to so many other cool people. I mean, Daniele Vignelli was one of my first guests on my show because I heard him on the Rogan podcast. Dan Carlin was one of the first guests on my show because I heard him on the Joe Rogan podcast. So without a doubt, he's I wouldn't say red pilled anybody, but he might have definitely expanded people's perspectives on the world and exposed them to some really interesting characters like Graham Hancock and so many others. Yep. And obviously, you know, he wouldn't stray away from conspiracy theories being discussed on a show, because why would you still have Eddie Bravo on it from time to time? Yep. But Eddie Bravo was also on my show. You know, he's another guy that you know, I got to know or whatever from starting my show or whatnot. So I know some people who know him, and they seem to think that, and there's some evidence to believe this, because he has, if you listen to his show, which I don't do it nearly as often as I used to, because there's so many other great shows out there, and it's hard to keep up with what's going on and keep up with all the shows that I subscribe to. But if you listen to, there's been episodes of late and definitely throughout this whole coronavirus thing where you hear him complain about, you know, YouTube censorship in regards to getting in trouble. The whole not going live thing, I was skeptical about it at first, like why, what was his incentive, what was his reasoning, his logic. But it sounds like, and he's kind of given hints to the fact that it had much more to do with just YouTube pulling down his videos because they played a clip of something that they were discussing, or played a clip of a song that they were talking about, and he was trying to avoid all those headaches. And so I think money probably did have something to do with it, because obviously if the video gets pulled down, you lose ad money. Mm-hmm. But I also think it was just because it was some extra headaches. Now, in regards to like the vaccine thing and some of the other things that he's kind of gotten some shit for, and when I had Del Bigtree on my show a couple times ago, it wasn't when he was on the Union of Unwanted episode, but he was on my show as a solo guest. Prior to that, at the very end, I asked him about like, hey, we got to get you in Joe Rogan because he's having all these other shitheads that are pushing one narrative. Why not be fair and have somebody who has a different perspective and let people decide? And he came out and said Joe Rogan's a pussy. I mean, his exact terms at the were, and I'm quoting him directly. I mean, Joe Rogan's a pussy. He will not have anybody from our side on. Apparently, Robert Kennedy Jr. has made an effort to go on there. I guess Bigtree has made an effort, and I mean, these are people who are pretty famous. I mean, I'm sure they have some mutual friends, maybe agents, managers, who knows, mutual friends where they can definitely talk to his people and get on there if they wanted to. Joe Rogan's had people that are much less famous than people like Robert Kennedy Jr. or Bigtree. And so initially, I must say, like, it bothered me because vaccines is definitely one of those issues that I'm real passionate about. And I just think health, nutrition, medicine, all these things are just topics that I've always been really intrigued with and passionate about. And it bothered me quite a bit. I mean, it got to the point where I'm just like, fuck Rogan. I mean, I felt like, these guys are really making an effort. I mean, I just heard it right from them that they're making an effort to go on and he's not returning any calls or whatnot. But and then, I talked to some other people that I know that know Rogan, and they're saying that they, and again, I don't know if they're not confirming it because they know and they don't want to, they don't want people doing what I'm doing and saying that, hey, this person said this, or they just really, it's just a hunch, but a much better guess coming from them because they know them personally. They're saying that it's because of all the censorship and because he's been so afraid, because this was before the Spotify agreement, and it kind of makes sense now a little bit, the theory that it's all the censorship that's causing him to not give the other side a voice, and eventually maybe he will. So maybe that's what it is. Like he's just trying to milk the YouTube cow for the time being, knowing that eventually he'll go to Spotify and that will be the majority of his listenership, and money and income will come from there. Then he won't have to kind of deal with the bullshit of YouTube. I want to believe that's true. I want to believe that when he goes to Spotify, he won't be afraid of having somebody on. I mean, he does have Eddie Bravo on. He's had Alex Jones on twice. So he's not afraid of having, but I guess the other counter argument, right, would be, well, he's only having people on that go way over the top.
Yeah,
and
Flat
maybe
Earth and Alex Jones, right?
Exactly. So one of those things where like, oh, well, nobody's really going to take it that seriously. And then when, in regards to having somebody credible, I shouldn't say credible. That's because I don't want to offend Eddie Bravo or Alex Jones, because they both do their part. And I think in regards to, waking people up and just kind of getting people to look at issues they might have not looked at.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody who I think the average person would find more credible, which is, and really focuses on only that issue, or, issues are similar to that. And so I wonder, I'm curious. I want to believe, like yourself. I mean, he was a huge influence of mine. His show, like I said, was one of the first shows I really got obsessed with. So I want to believe, after hearing hours and hours of hearing somebody talk and have discussions, you want to believe you kind of know, you have a good idea of their character. You want to believe that he's a sincere person. And I mean, that's one of the unique things about podcasts. I remember talking to Christopher Ryan, and he he talks about it, how he meets people and they know everything about him, and he knows nothing about the person he's meeting, and they feel like they're friends because they've been listening to you share your ideas and perspectives and all your opinions, and having hours and hours of discussions. And so with that said, like, I kind of feel like the majority of us who have listened to many Rogan podcasts, especially because they're so long, it's hard to fake who you are for that long. You want to truly believe that you talk for 2-3 hours and you hear enough of those 2-3 hour conversations, you're going to have a pretty good idea of who you think this person is. I'm not saying that we couldn't be wrong, or maybe this specific issue, he's just different than others. But I want to believe that, he is open-minded and that he has and will look at all sides of an argument. And so, I mean, I guess we cross our fingers and hope that, people who are close to him, who are saying that, once he goes to Spotify, things might be different. And it's the YouTube censorship that's really causing all this. I mean, he has been outspoken about the YouTube censorship and his dislike of them censoring doctors and people who are giving nutritional advice that can help strengthen your immune system. So, yeah, I mean, without a doubt, I definitely think that there's some evidence there to believe that that theory might be correct, that maybe he is just waiting, waiting till he can kind of give the full FU to YouTube and go to Spotify.
Yeah, that'll definitely be the true test, I guess. We'll find out come next year. We'll see what it actually looks like there. And you're right about him having Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson on. I think that debate episode that they did with Michael Shermer was really good. And just the fact that he's open to those sorts of ideas shows that he's still open-minded. But yeah, I'm definitely curious to see what's going to happen there. I thought we transitioned just a little bit into the propaganda proper talk here. I want to read you a little quote from Jacques Ellul, 1965. It says, quote, "We are here in the presence of an organized myth that tries to take hold of the entire person. Through the myth it creates, propaganda imposes a complete range of intuitive knowledge, susceptible of only one interpretation, unique and one-sided, and precluding any divergence. This myth becomes so powerful that it invades every area of consciousness, leaving no faculty or motivation intact. It stimulates in the individual a feeling of exclusiveness and produces a biased attitude. The myth has such motive force that once accepted, it controls the whole of the individual, who becomes immune to any other influence." End quote. And just when I hear that, it's so hard not to think about the Corona situation that we're in now, and how hard they're pressing on the masks and all of the other areas in all facets of society, right? We're seeing it in TV commercials now with people with masks on when they go to the grocery store, and showing the happy family unmasked at home, right? It's absolutely pervasive.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, some of the older documentaries that we talked about, what kind of was a huge influence. Another one was Adam Curtis. He did a great documentary called "A Century of Self" about Edward Bernays and
Love
public
that. Yeah.
all that stuff. And he's kind of a lesson known filmmaker in the US. I think in the UK and Europe he's much more popular, but in the US I think a lot of people probably aren't familiar with his work. But he's done a lot of really great documentaries. I don't agree with him on everything, but it's funny because another person that's kind of similar like that is Noam Chomsky, right? Because he manufacturing consent. I mean, he talks about Edward Bernays, he talks about propaganda, he talks about controlling the masses and using propaganda or whatnot. But then they're also like in regards to Chomsky, he's like 9/11. That's ridiculous to think it's an inside job. And I'm like, wait. You're talking about like controlling the masses and talking us into wars and doing, so many different things. And yet like this seems hard to believe. Like yeah. So I mean, I guess my point is you don't have to agree with somebody on everything to at least agree that they've done some good work that's worth checking out. And but yeah, the power of propaganda is super important. I did a interview with somebody from this documentary called "The Corporation," which I think when it came out, it was like the best selling documentary in like Canadian history. It was a Canadian filmmakers, and I think eventually Adam Scorgie, the culture high about the war on drugs, ended up breaking that record. Which he was another guy, a Rogan guy who's been on my show, but that documentary, they really dissect how corporations, the science, psychology, all the techniques that go into getting you to want something, buy something, desire something. And I guess you can't talk about this stuff without talking about Edward Bernays, because of course, as the nephew of Sigmund Freud, he really, he wrote the book Propaganda, public relations. Anybody who goes to school for public relations, you're learning about Edward Bernays' techniques, and yet very few people understand that his techniques were used for many other evil things, like selling us wars and buying stuff that we don't really want or need, because he just understood how to manipulate our desires. And some of the techniques he used, in regards to, well, he understood that a lot of times we're not buying things, or you can buy things for other reasons that aren't conscious. There's subconscious things pulling at your desires and wants and needs, and also he's selling you not the product but the feeling the product gives you, the image the product might create, in regards to, like, for example, you look at like car commercials. GM, they do a truck commercial. What do they use? They use a really deep voice, country sounding guy. Why are they not using that voice when they're selling the Cadillac? because the Cadillac, it's usually a British accent. So what they're selling you isn't just the product itself. They're selling you the image that that product will create. They're selling you the fact that when you buy this truck, people are going to think you're rugged and you get your hands dirty and you're this country guy. So it fits that whole image. When you buy that Cadillac, it's people are going to think you're a CEO, you're a businessman, you have your own business, you have all these luxury things, and you're doing financially really well. So they're selling you the image, and these techniques are used for everything from selling cars to selling wars to selling just about anything. And that's why I think in many cases there's constant battles going on that we're not even aware of. And you watch a commercial, you watch a movie, there's all these little tricks that they use to get you to think a certain way or feel a certain way. And even if they're not on purpose, right? I mean, even if they're not on purpose, like all these things are causing us to or at least they're molding our perspectives on so many different things, and the way we look at the world and whatnot. And that's why parenting, for example, I think is super important to be as involved in your kids' lives as possible, because if you're not influencing them, all these other things we're talking about are right. The school system and who created the school systems, the TV commercials, social media, which are hiring psychologists to understand how to get you to keep clicking and keep coming back for more. So propaganda is everywhere, and it's affecting us at all times. And I think it takes a lot of stopping and self-reflecting and trying to understand, why am I doing this? Why do I want this? To really fight back. Another great documentary by my friend Richard Grove from Tragedy and Hope is State of Mind, the Psychology of Control, and a lot of great people in that documentary. And it really goes through the history of how they try to control the masses, and all the different techniques of propaganda and whatnot. But the psychology of control, it's a real thing. I mean, people in power are dissecting methods and trying to understand how to get us to do certain things or vote a certain way. I mean, you look at politics. Politics is all propaganda. The speeches are written a certain way. Why? Because they're trying to get you to think that they feel a certain way, or that they have certain beliefs or whatnot. So it's like, we all know that they have speechwriters. We all know that they have certain messages that they use, not because they necessarily think that's the most important thing I should focus on, but because this is what my team is telling me is a topic or a message that I should focus on because it gets me more votes. So, I mean, there's propaganda everywhere, and people need to kind of understand that. And to fight back, you have to, I think, get to the root of why you believe something. Question yourself as much as you question other people. We should question ourselves. I think especially in the alternative media community, you see it with us, you see it with just about any community, where people just join a team and they're like, well, I'm the 9/11 was lasers, the towers came down by lasers tribe, that's my tribe, so that's what I'm sticking to. And or JFK has a bunch of different perspectives on what people think happened or who they think did it. And so I think we should always question, because as people in the alternative media community, we're constantly questioning government narratives, we're constantly questioning the media, we're questioning corporations if their moral compass. But how often do we question ourselves? How often do we say, well, why do I believe this, and why do I lean this way or that way or whatnot? So I think music, like we talked about, you see a correlation between musicians or people who are creative and being skeptical of things and looking below the surface. But I also think that people who love philosophy, that same thing, like people who because I mean, philosophy is just literally just questioning everything, and then those questions are never really answered, and that's kind of what makes it interesting, is that they're never really answered. It's the same questions being reused over and over again, and people debating them over and over again. And that's the way people should look at everything, and including themselves.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just for my journey here, I like, spirituality is a huge part of it for me, and that's kind of where I came to all this from, is being in my early teens and dealing with some depression and anxiety and stuff, and just trying to figure out kind of where the answers lie, and going through Eckhart Tolle and then up through some different channeled materials. And you kind of learn that consciousness exists outside the body, and that goes completely against the mainstream narrative. And so once you start to understand kind of that side of things, it feels like it really gives you a way into looking kind of behind the veil. And I think being able to do, whatever your practice is, whether it's mindfulness or anything like that, you can really pick up on your own thought patterns and why you have certain beliefs. And I think that you're right. I think doing our own internalized work, and on belief work especially, is probably the most powerful thing that we can do to kind of improve our own lives, right? You start to understand the impulses that are being channeled, and you can cut them off at the pass instead of just, rocking through those things. But it's funny now, I've got two kids, right? I've got a 2 and 3 year old daughter, and you start to try and look at things through their eyes, and it's like, okay, well, I guess we're not doing TV. once I started reading some books, and you see kind of how the flashing screens really impacts their development of their lizard brain, right? It trains their amygdala to be more impulsive, the higher levels of ADHD, all these kinds of things. And so now, we've basically stuck that path for the most part. We get 30 minutes of Mr. Rogers now and again with the girls, because it's hard to dispute like his intentions. But I'll take my girls to the park, for example, and I see the way that they act compared to kids that that are just stuck in front of the TV all day, and there's a drastic difference. And like I don't think that's just my parenting. I think that's taking them away from the influence of TV, right?
Yeah, as a parent, and my kids aren't too far from the age of your kids. I have my daughter's turning 4 this week, and my son's 5. And yeah, without a doubt, I mean, so many of these issues become more important after having kids, because it's like, in regards, so many of the people in the like the GMO community or the vaccine community, they're pissed off moms. They're passionate moms who are like, maybe they ate like shit when they were growing up, but they're like, well, now I don't want to hurt my child. There's nothing I love more than my child. I want to really think out everything that I'm doing in regards to them. And so let me question these things and really get to the bottom of these things. And that's why they really are some of the most passionate people in regards to some of these topics. You look at GMOs or Monsanto documentaries. I mean, there's always women, and same thing with vaccines. There's a lot of moms who are just upset because their kid got hurt, or they think other moms could be making the wrong decision and getting injured. So yeah, I mean, I think when you're a parent, you analyze all these things. I think some parents, they're just like, oh, well, that's the way I was raised, so I don't care, And I also think it's lazy parenting, right? I mean, it's much easier to put them on their tablet or in front of the TV for hours a day than it is to actually spend time talking to them and playing with them or whatnot. But like, I think most kids, it wouldn't be hard. Like when people are like, oh, my kid doesn't want to go outside, he's on his tablet all day. I'm like, well, are you going outside with them? Are you playing with them? Because guess what? Like if I was growing up and my parents said, hey, go outside, and I was a only child and I had no friends who lived on the street, I had nobody to play with, I'd be like, yeah, fuck that. I'm going to go inside and play video games. I'm like, it's more fun than just being outside doing nothing. So, I see it with my own kids where like, I have no problem getting them outside. If I say, if I'm busy doing something like getting dinner ready or whatnot, and they want to watch a little TV and play with their toys, I'm cool with that. But the second I say, hey, you know what, let's go outside before dinner and let's play, that's what they'll put everything down. To them, human interaction, enjoying something with others is much more fun. They understand that. So a tablet is fun when it's a last resort, but if they had other people to interact with and play with, that's their first resort. That's the first thing, their first option. And I always try to have people over the house and go places with them and give them new input. I remember my wife and I, we bring them just about everywhere. And sometimes my mother's like, oh, I'll watch them if you want to go run some errands. I'm like, no, I'll bring them, and I'm always thinking like, okay, when I travel and I'm getting new input, right? And I'm seeing new things, new environments, new people, new signs, new everything, buildings. It's sparking kind of a different pattern of thinking. It's sparking some me to get out of my routine of like being in my comfort zone and seeing all the same things every day and whatnot. And it kind of provokes thought and whatnot. So I think with the kids, it probably similar reaction where if every time they go somewhere new and they're looking around and they're observing their surroundings, it's probably doing some good to their brain in regards to just seeing the same cartoon over and over again or playing in the same yard over and over again and doing all the same things. So I think it's super important. Yeah, bring your kids out, get them away from the TV. And I think in many cases, I hate to say it because I'm sure some people would maybe disagree with me, but I think in just about all cases, if your kid won't go outside, it's probably a little bit of your fault. Find something fun for them to do. I mean, yesterday we had a couple kids in the neighborhood at my house, and I got a bunch of softballs. I'm like, hey, you guys ever play dodgeball? And then we got some cones and we created a line. I'm like, hey, let's play dodgeball. And they're having a blast. They like, we couldn't get them in the house, and we couldn't get the neighbor kids to leave. And but it was because they were having fun. And so it just takes a little bit of effort. And of course, if so I do think sometimes it's lazy parenting, and the long-term effects of those things, you never know what they are. We all deal with some type of trauma, right? We all deal with some type of something that maybe was accidentally caused because we don't know how exactly your kids are going to handle something, right? Like, so we discipline our kids a certain way, assuming that, like, okay, they need tough love, or maybe with this kid, he doesn't need tough love, so let me be a little easier on him or whatnot. But you never know, like, long-term effects when they become a adult. They're like, Dad, when you used to do that, I used to hate that, or I used to get so mad when you did this or that. So it's like we all have certain things. Like, one of my traumas is growing up kind of poor. When we came to America, we like, my mom was always stressing about money. Money was always was always the hot topic at home. It's like, how do we save more of it? How do we appreciate it? It was constantly like, other kids had nice things. I never had it. So I'm just like, fuck, man, I hate money, because it's just like, it's always stressing us out, and it's always the topic. So in my personal life, I am horrendous with money, because I'm just like, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want anything to do with it. Like, my wife, I'm like, are the bills paid? Do you need money for the bills? Here, I don't even want to look at them. Like, I want to spend as much as my mental time thinking about things I enjoy, pondering on things that are going to help me better understand the world or myself. And if it's not that, like, I only have so much bandwidth. I'm not this super intelligent person, I would say, that can, like, just gather all this information at all times. And I mean, I really envious the people who just can have super stressful jobs and can handle it and have all these things going on at once. To me, I mean, I think most of us could probably do that, but for myself, if I can avoid living that type of lifestyle, I'm mentally in a better place. I can just focus on the things I enjoy. I mean, you don't get to hit the reset button. When this journey's over, it's over. And well, we think. I mean, it could be wrong, of course, but this, at least this material world, this journey that I'm on as we speak, when it's over, it's over. And I want to spend as much time possible doing the things that bring me some type of pleasure or joy, experiencing things. And I understand that there's things in life that are necessary. You have to have a job. You have to find some financial way of staying afloat. But you know what? You don't get caught up in that shit. You want to talk about propaganda. How about the propaganda of the American dream? The fact that what brings you happiness is getting a high-paying job, buy these material things, get the new car, get the white picket fence, the big house, and all of a sudden you'll just be happy. Well, that fucking journey isn't for everybody. And a lot of people go down that path thinking it's going to bring them happiness, but there's a lot of sacrifice to get there. It's sacrifice of stress, which can have a huge negative effect on your body and health and mind. And then there's also sacrifice of time, and there's nothing more valuable than time. You can always make more money. You can't make more time. And when that time's up, you're fucked. Like, you all you can do is reflect on your life and say, hey, I wish I spend more time with my friends and family. I wish I spend more time and taking pictures of my kids and going to my kids' soccer practice, and seeing them play. I mean, I try, and it's funny because, like, my father, if you have more questions you want to ask before I continue just talking, let me know.
No, go ahead, man. You're killing it. Yeah.
But my father, when I was growing up, he never really cared about going to my soccer practices or any of my practices of any sort, And it wasn't, I don't blame him, because you were a creature of our environment, and I'm sure my grandfather was equally as poor in regards to being involved in his life. But so he did what he thought a father did, and that's pay the bills, go to work. I get home tired, kind of leave me alone type thing. And when we have to work on Saturdays from time to time, we have a little family-owned construction company. I'm always like, hey, if you can find somebody, I'm not interested. He's like, oh, well, you don't need money. I'm like, it's not that I don't need money. I'm like my son at the time, you know, my son was having a lot of his things on Saturdays, and I'm like, no, I want to go to his martial arts, or I want to go to his basketball thing, or I want to go whatever. And you're like, whoa, you don't have somebody who to bring him? I'm like, Dad, you don't fucking get it. It's not a chore that I need to get out of. It's something I actually, and it was like, it was like this point in my life where I'm just like, holy fuck. Like I understood he didn't really get it, but I didn't understand to the extent of it, because
Right.
now I'm a father and he's looking at me like, what are you doing? Like, wouldn't you rather be at work making some money than, and it's just like, he just didn't understand my perspective. And, you know, I almost feel bad for people. I shouldn't say almost, I do feel bad for people like my father, who maybe wasn't his own fault, because he, like I said, I think he did what he thought fathers did. But you miss out on so many enjoyable moments in your life because you just feel like that's the mother's job to bring them to their things or whatnot. And you're missing, I mean, just for example, my son had soccer practice he started this Monday, and he had this, you know, he did this move that he does, and he like kind of crossed this kid over and then scored with his left foot, which I'm always like, hey, you got to practice your left foot. And he looked at me, and I was there, and I was so happy to be there. Like that, when he looked up and he knew I witnessed that with him, like it touched me and it touched him. And you could tell, like, there's this moment that's like, he was so good, because it's like anything in life. What good is it enjoying something if you don't have people you love to enjoy it with? You know, like I used to get mad at my wife because we would have people over for like a UFC match, right? And then I always have people over for the UFCs, and then like every once in a while, my wife would be like, "Hey, you know what? We had a busy, hectic Saturday. Let's just watch it ourselves. We'll just have some drinks. The kids will hang out. We'll have some ice cream or whatever, and we'll just." And next thing you know, she's out cold, you know. And I'm watching the whole UFC by myself, and something amazing happens, and everybody's asleep, and I have nobody to talk to about it. And then next morning, I give her shit about it. I'm like, "What the fuck? I should have had some friends over," because I'm like, you know, you were sleeping, and I'm like, it just wasn't as enjoyable when the big knockout comes or the big upset comes, and I'm like, oh my god, did you see that? And everybody's sleeping, you know. It just having somebody there, it sounds, you know, it just to enjoy those moments together. And I mean, I've definitely, this type of thinking has fucked me in so many ways in regards to, like, I don't take advantage of opportunities to get ahead. I could have a little nicer house. I could have a little newer car. I could have a lot of probably financial things if I took advantage of every financial opportunity I had. If I took advantage of every, instead of spending so much free time hanging out with my kids, bring them to the parks, going to the store, like, hey, let's just go to the Walmart and get a new toy. You know, you guys haven't got a toy in a while. You guys have been great. Let's go get a toy. You know, let's do something together, and then we'll go get dinner, and we'll have a fun day together. You know, to me, though, that's what life's about. You know, that's, you know, when when our physical bodies are done, the only thing that's still alive and well is our legacy, is the way people remember us, the memories that we've created together, the impacts we've had on people's lives. I mean, that is the ripple effect. That is us having you know, the conversations I've had with my kids will hopefully impact them and help mold them into better people, and hopefully they take some of the things that I hope that I could teach them, and they can use that to mold people younger than them or other people around them or whatnot. And so to me, that's what it's all about. That's way more important. You're talking about spirituality. I think yoga and a lot of other hobbies that got really popular, you know, IPAs, everybody's into IPAs now, and bourbon. You know, I love bourbon, but I think it's not just those specific things. It's about it, the fact that it brings people together. It's the other things you get from it, right? Like, we all go to yoga. I get to see my friends. We have, I don't go to yoga, but you know, but the people who do, or my wife goes to Zumba, for example. It's like, it becomes a community, right? Which is one of the reasons why I think people like churches, right? It's a community. You see the same people. You feel like we're friends. If I need something, I can, they'd help me. If they need something, I would help them. You don't feel alone in the world. And you know, during the coronavirus lockdown, that was one of the things that pissed me off the most. It wasn't just the fact that, you prevented people from working and whatnot, whatever, that's, if we have to be locked down if we honestly had to be locked down for a month or a couple months, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. If is really a threat that we should be concerned about, I'm okay with that. But don't tell people, stay away from your friends and family, don't go see anybody, quarantine. Let us know if people are hanging out at parks, and let us know if people are having get-togethers, like all that public shaming when you're turning people on one another, and the need that there is for social interaction. It is so great with humans. I mean, I forget what her first name was, but something Costa. She was a author and researcher and whatnot, who's been on my show some years ago. And I remember her telling me this because it stuck with me, because I'm like, wow, that kind of seems like a lot, but I guess it makes sense. She talked about how humans are at their happiest and more efficient when they have like 6 hours of social interaction throughout the day. So like it kind of makes sense. I mean, a lot of people who dislike their job, they put up with a lot of shit at work, or maybe a stressful job or a boss they don't like, because there's other people that they like there, that they get along with, that they look forward to seeing. I think many of us podcasters, like you said something about being selfish, like a little bit is like, yeah, I want to change the world, I want to make an impact, but a little bit's also because I get something from it and I enjoy it, and I get to reach out to people that I find interesting, and have an excuse for them to sit down with me for an hour. I mean, I can't even find friends of mine who live down the street to take an hour out of their day to talk to me. So I mean, now I have a justification to do it. It's like, hey, you get to pick at each other's brain and thoughts and whatnot. So when you're doing that to people who are going to AA, right? People who didn't have that community to keep them clean and away from any substances. People who just need church, not just for the spiritual reasons, but just because they liked the community. They saw people that they liked and they got along with. I also think that the mask thing and the separation thing was also to prevent people from discussing what the fuck was going on. Because honestly, my wife will tell you, for better or worse, I'm very outspoken with my ideas and opinions, and I think I'm less than I was when I started the podcast. But when somebody says something that's incorrect, I'll feel the need to be like, hey, you know what? Like, that's not actually right. Like, the tests aren't accurate, or the science isn't settled. And when you talk to people, even at the height of the lockdown, when we're going to a restaurant getting takeout, you're 6 feet away from somebody, and people are like, isn't this fucking crazy? I would be like, oh, you just sparked a conversation with me. Let me take this moment while we're stuck in line to tell you my opinion on what the fuck's going on. And it's just amazing how many people are like, oh, you're so right, man. This is so blown out of proportion. This is so blown out of proportion. It's like everybody believed it, but nobody was talking with one another. And because nobody was sharing these thoughts with one another, and nobody felt like nobody knew that people felt the same way they did, it was super easy to control people and get everybody to just go along with the herd. And I guess I kind of brought it back around to propaganda.
Oh man, that was great, and you had me thinking about the American dream there, and something that I think about quite often is that, like, pushing women into the workforce. And I've got no problem with women working, obviously, but in the 60s you could support a household on one income, or the 50s, let's say, and now that's an absolutely privileged position to be able to do that. Like, most families need both parents to be working, and so you're leaving the kids to the state or whoever it is to be educated by them, whether it's the TV or an uncle or aunt if you're lucky, but usually is into daycares and then into school, right? And so that it seems like we get further and further detached from our own children and being able to raise them. And I'm totally in agreement with you on experiences being the most important kind of vital part of our life, especially when it comes to raising kids, man. Like, I was raised by a single mom, and like, I didn't get those interactions with my dad in the same way that you're talking about with your kid. And obviously I'm trying to bring that to be something that's important, and I want them to always know that that's important in our life, right? I want them to understand that I'll always be there for them, and I'll make sacrifices in terms of financial gain or whatever it takes in order to be there and be present for them. But it just really seems like the propaganda is pervasive from the state, just in terms of trying to push these things that, they'll spin it like it's benefiting the woman to be in the workforce. And sure, it's great that they can, but it's not necessarily great for the family as a whole, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think And I think it's on purpose, right? Because a lot of these broken families are kids who, you see it all the time where kids come from what people will say, oh, they come from a good family. I'm like, well, what's a good family? Does that mean that like they have high paying jobs, they have good careers? Because I'm like, that's one aspect of their, that's one job. The other job is parenting. So they might be good at like the other life stuff, but the most important job they might suck at. They might never be present. They might never have time or energy to spend with their kids. And which means who's influencing them? If it's not you, it's TV, it's media, it's whatever music you're listening to or whatever it may be. So yeah, I mean, I think it's super important to try to carve out as much time as possible to spend with your kids, even if that means maybe you don't have the biggest house, or maybe they're going to have friends that have more material shit, but they're going to appreciate it. I always say, like, my kids don't give a fuck if I raise them in $100,000 house or a $1 million house. Like, they just want me to be around. They like interacting with me, thank God, for the time being, until they're teenagers. They like seeing me, they like playing with me, they like having conversations with me. And to me, like, that's the most important thing. And the fact that I make time to do those things is awesome. I mean, even my wife, for example, she works Thursday and Friday nights at a restaurant. And so a lot of times I come home from work, and then we kind of, basically hi, bye, she goes to work and I come home and I watch the kids. And I love Thursday and Friday nights because it's just me. There's less distractions. And I think it's good to have that one-on-one time with your kids, and to be able to really have those deep conversations, even if you just go for a drive and it's just you two and you can kind of have those deep conversations. At least for me, it seems like those are the moments when those deep conversations happen. And so I love that. I love just having the ability to even do that. And I remember thinking to myself sometimes, I'm like, well, if I was at work every day till 6 o'clock at night, and then basically I just came home to kiss my kids to bed, kiss them goodnight and call it a day, then who the fuck's influencing them? Who are they going to go to with these questions? Who are they going to go to some type of guidance and to help explain maybe a part of the world they don't really understand? And I'm not the best at explaining things, but I'm glad that I can be a part of that process. I can be a part of helping mold the way they look at the world. And yeah, I mean, so it really is, it's such an important topic. I think parenting has become one of those things where there's a great book called what the fuck is it called? It's by Michael Sandel, and maybe it's what money can't buy, maybe. But he says this thing where he's like, we went from having a capitalist economy to having a capitalist society, and it's like where it's all about making money. Like, that's literally, like, that's your life goal. That's what your priority should be. That's how your whole life should be, I guess, built. It should be built on this idea of, like, all your actions, all your moves, all your decisions should be based on, how do I get more money, and does this help me get more money? And that's why I'm turned off by salesmen. I'm turned off by businessmen, people who are like, I feel like are trying to sell me something. Like, I love London Real, and I love Valuetainment with Patrick David, but they're both good shows. But and they do a lot of, obviously during the COVID-19 thing, I give them a lot of props for having people on that were as controversial as Robert Kennedy Jr. and Del Bigtree and Dr. Judy and whatnot. But Jesus, does it turn me off when Brian Callen's like, join our team and we have this plan to help you succeed and blah blah. It's just like, I'm like, I don't know, man. Just like, do what you love. And people are going to learn how, from your conversations, people are going to learn how to do those things. The way you pursue a fulfilling hobby or passion, that's going to be inspiration for other people to do it. Just talking about that. And anytime somebody's trying to sell me something, it like I said, it just turns me off. I just feel like, yeah, you get what I'm saying? You ever talk to somebody and you're like, this motherfucker sounds like a salesman. Yeah. I'm like, he's not selling me something, I don't think, but I'm like, he sounds like a salesman. The way he pitches things, the way he, I don't know. It just rubs me the wrong way. I just feel like I can't trust them. Like I just want somebody. I'd rather somebody who is less well spoken and but sounds sincere. To me, I'd rather listen listen to somebody like that or have a discussion with somebody like that.
It's funny with Brian Rose from London Real. I get the exact same feeling, man. I really enjoy his conversations, but I subscribe to his email or whatever, and he's so pushy in terms
Oh,
of trying to get you into his sales funnel right at whatever point, and it's like, man,
join
just
my
give me a
pyramid.
break.
Join
Yeah,
my pyramid scheme.
yeah,
It's like I'm
exactly.
not saying it doesn't work. My thing is like when we'll teach you how to start a podcast. It's like wait, fucking Google it. Like it's not that hard to start a podcast. Like we can figure it out. Like most people can figure it out, and there's plenty of people online putting out free information on how to do it. I mean, I think some people do need inspiration. Like you need somebody to you need that. Some people are really into those motivational speakers, which I'm not. I'm like, just like you can do it and go out, go out there and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, I guess. I mean, I guess it's the equivalent of like listening to a heavy metal song when you're working out. It like pumps you up a little bit. But my problem with the motivational speakers is that they're really, in many cases, just trying to get you to focus on how do I help you make more money? Let me help you make more money. Let me teach you how to make. It's all about that. And I'm like, wait, you got it all fucking wrong. Like, that's not going to bring them happiness. That's going to bring them financial wealth. But are you focusing on also telling them that, hey, do something you love? Like, even if you don't make more money, how many people have taken a promotion that pays better but is more stressed just to regret taking that promotion because you're like, fuck it, I was way happier when I was making less money. I should have asked you way like an hour ago if I could swear on this show. But,
Oh, you're good. You're good.
And how many people look back and they're like, you know what, I wish I didn't take that promotion because I have less free time. I'm going home stressed, and it's affecting my relationship with my kids. It's affecting my personal life. It's affecting all this stuff. And who cares if I make a little bit fucking extra more money? I make more money, I'm just gonna spend it on something else. Like, okay, I'm gonna fucking subscribe to something I couldn't afford to subscribe to, or I'm gonna get HBO now. Woo wee, I got HBO now, but now I'm more stressed at work. So it's like to me, it's like, yeah, it is I've said it in one of my songs. It was a lyric where I called it the sabotaged American dream. And it really is a sabotaged American dream where you're sabotaged to think that if I do these things, it will bring me happiness. It will bring me success. But their definition of success is narrow and only works for some people, and some people will never be happy no matter how much money, they have or power they have. I mean, look at Donald Trump or any person who already has fame and probably plenty of financial wealth, and yet it's the addiction of more and more and more keeps them going and keeps them doing things like, I mean, I don't think Donald Trump or any politician went into politics because they want to change the world for better. I think it was an addiction to money and power and more fame and more money and more power, and that's the next step. That's the next road to more money and power, and it becomes this monopoly game where just like, well, I'm gonna show everybody that I can get to the pinnacle of money and power, and so yeah, I mean, I think these are all things that I think are important, because even the way we talked about, like the way we looked at our lives and all that stuff. I mean, the way we look at our lives and us analyzing our thoughts is also going to affect the way we talk to our kids and when we describe things to the kids. So it's important to self-reflect and understand why you believe certain things or why you do certain things, because if not, there's going to be times where you're going to discipline your kid for something you probably shouldn't have, or you're going to tell them not to do something, or get frustrated with them when you really should. It's not even a problem with them. It's an internal issue. It's maybe because some trauma you're dealing with is causing you to react a certain way. And so I think we all need to pick up on that as much as possible, because if not, then, we're going to be traumatized kids traumatizing kids.
Yeah, you just pass it down for sure, man. It goes generation to generation. I mean, you see that with what's his name, Gabor Mate, I think, or Gabor
Well,
Mate, the guy that was
Rupert Sheldrake also talks about it, and he's been on my
yeah.
show. He talks. There's a study, I think it's called "Inheriting Father's Fears," and it was a study where they sprayed a scent, and every time they sprayed this scent, they would shock I think it was a mouse, and they would shock it, and it was a scent that was something that they would never interact with in the natural world. So it was this completely like synthetic scent, and they would shock it, and then for 2 generations later. If you sprayed that scent without ever doing this experiment, their kids and their grandkids would have the same panic reaction where they
Oh.
smelled that scent and knew something bad would happen. So without a doubt, like it's more than just hair color, eye color, or whatnot. They're inheriting a bunch of other things from us that we're not even sure yet or understand.
So just kind of keeping it on children for a second. I know you've been pretty vocal about your kids not being vaccinated, and I'm in the same boat with mine. But how do you approach those conversations with people? Because I know at work, people kind of know me as the conspiracy guy around my work, just because I'm, like I listen to podcasts at work, and you get excited, so you start talking about people and trying to share information, and you kind of learn pretty quick who's got an open mind and who doesn't. But it's kind of funny. You'll get people that I'll get people come up to me when it's one-on-one and be like, "Oh, hey, what's really going on with whatever, right? What do you think about this, that, or the other?" But one issue that I've had the hardest time cracking is just vaccines. Like people seem to be so programmed into thinking that one, they're safe and effective, and two, they're beneficial and that we need them. So I mean, how do you come across those conversations, and how do you handle them to kind of at least keep their minds open about it?
Yeah, well, one thing I think we have to do as people who question vaccines is to let people know that that's what we're doing. We're questioning them. We're not saying that all of them are bad. We're not saying that even the theory of, okay, you inject the virus in somebody and then they create the antivirus and it helps their immune system or whatnot. Like that alone kind of makes sense and we get it. But we also understand that people are different. People can be exposed to the same thing and react completely differently. So one example I like to use sometimes when I'm talking to people about this is like if I give every kid peanut butter, like most people will be okay, but it's going to be a murderous weapon to some kids, you know? So does that mean that I'm anti peanut butter? Does that mean that if I say peanut butter can kill some kids, does that mean I'm anti peanut butter? Does that mean that peanut butter is dangerous to everybody? No, but we understand that. And it's not something controversial to say. But yet, if I say vaccines, which most people aren't familiar with the ingredients that are in it, most people don't know that there's a vaccine court that's given out tons of money to vaccine injured uh, uh, families of vaccine injured kids, then most people just aren't familiar with these things. So you try to chip away logically and try to say, well, is it scientific to say that the same cocktail of ingredients in a vaccine will have a safe and effective result to every person who injects it? It's not scientific because you can't say that about anything that's on this planet. There's nothing that I can give to every single person that people will have the exact same effect. So why would vaccines be like that? Another thing I talk about too is how it's funny how we can find example of pharmaceutical companies being criminals, like legitimately getting in trouble, getting sued, having to pay fines for fucked up things that they do, selling drugs that they knew that were unsafe, or vice, tons of different examples of stuff like that. But yet they hire all the moral people and they put them together in their vaccine department. Like, how ridiculous does that sound? Like, it's the same people, Pfizer, Merck, all these people who are doing things based on profit, increasing profit and making more money. Those are the same people and the same business practices that are used to make money in the vaccine department. It's no different. And so yeah, it is a hard conversation because I think a little bit of it is we're all a little sensitive when we talk about our kids. We all want to believe that we're good parents. We all want to believe that we're making the right decisions. We want to believe that however we're raising our kids is because this is the best way to do it. And we all get a little defensive when people say, oh, you should do this or you should do that, or you shouldn't hold your kids so much. You shouldn't do, whatever it may be. And so I think a little bit the reason why it's a little bit of a trigger topic is because a lot of times we're referring to our children, or at least we think about our kids when we're having these conversations. And but I also think a little bit is people are afraid of thinking like, could I have made a poor decision that could have had some strong, very dangerous consequences with my children? And I think that's scary. That's a scary thing to think about. I've had friends of mine who have come up to me, and many of them, like you said, privately, and said, oh, I feel so bad that I vaccinated my kids. I feel so bad. Like, and I'm like, dude, you were basing your opinion on information that you had. Unfortunately, that information is minimal and you're not seeing the other side of the argument. And this is again one of the issues that I have with Joe Rogan, because he's so influential and there's so many people listening to that show. And I mean, the millions and billions of people listening to that show. When you have somebody who's pro-vaccine on your show, and then people are going to assume that you're pro-vaccine because you haven't had anybody on the other side of the argument. I hate to say it, there's a lot of people who don't think for themselves. They're going to vaccinate their kids because Joe Rogan is on your team. He's on the "it's okay to vaccinate your kids" team. So he's having a huge impact on the decisions that people are making. And so I think, yeah, without a doubt, it's a very hard conversation. I try to let people know immediately that I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm just I think people should have the right to do whatever they want, but people should have access to all that information so they can make that decision wisely. And my biggest problem, and the reason why so many people in the vaccine movement are so passionate, is because of that, because of the fact that we know that information is being suppressed. You look at Zach Voorhees, who's been on my show. He's a Google engineer. He's been on a bunch of shows. He was a Google engineer who's kind of became a whistleblower, and he talked about how there's certain topics that are blackballed, that Google's not letting you hear that argument. They're not letting you Google that information. I mean, today I'm actually going to have actually soon I'm going to have Dr. Brian Hooker on, which I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was in the Vax documentary. He was the guy who had a vaccine injured child who was a scientist, very knowledgeable in regards to his ability to read science and understand science. He ends up contacting the CDC and he's like, "Hey, can you give me some of these studies? I want to kind of go through the data or whatnot." Gets hooked up with Dr. William Thompson, who becomes a CDC whistleblower, who's an author of some studies. And he's like, "Listen, I'm going to give you some stuff. And because I feel guilty every time I see a autistic child, knowing that these studies have been suppressed from the public, makes me feel guilty." He eventually recorded these phone calls. I mean, these phone calls with a CDC a doctor who was the author of many studies, recorded these phone calls, got the data sheets, got the research or whatever, eventually went public with it. And I'm about to have him on. I mean, this is I'm losing my train of thought because I think I was getting to a point that I was going to make. But regardless, my point is, it's somebody like him. He's going to be called the anti-vaxxer. Robert Kennedy's going to be called an anti-vaxxer. Del Bigtree's going to be called an anti-vaxxer. I get called an anti-vaxxer. And all I'm saying is why. Oh, that was my point. My point is that I was like, let me look up the old interview that Brian Hooker had on with Del Bigtree, or let me look up an old interview Brian Hooker had that with this on this show or that show or whatever. Mm-hmm. So because while I was working today, I'm like, just play it in the background. Couldn't find it. Couldn't find anything. Could barely find any information on him on YouTube or online. And so this is the problem. The problem is somebody who is completely unaware of both sides of the argument. Even if they want to do their own research, they can't even get the information. So that's right. This is propaganda, right? Because if you can control people's the information people are getting, you can control the decision that they made based on the information that they get, right? So it's quite easy to see how they're controlling people. So a lot of people during this COVID-19 thing that became much more aware of this vaccine topic and much more open-minded, I should say, to this vaccine topic. I think it kind of worked in our favor. It worked in our favor in regards to people who just want to push information. I want people to be able to watch the Vax documentary. I want people to be able to hear the CDC whistleblower story. I want people to know about the vaccine court and all these. And then you decide, like, okay, is the risk of my child getting this disease and possibly being harmed by it, is that greater, or is the risk of my child getting hurt by this vaccine? And actually, my kid might not even get this disease. So I'm putting them at risk to prevent something that they might not even get in the first place. So, to me, those are all internal dilemmas and debates that you should be having, but after getting all the information. Most of the time, people are going to see their pediatrician. they're vaccine pushers. They're going to, most of their job is vaccinating kids. I mean, that's literally like just the first couple of years of your kid's life. That's literally like the only reason you're going to the pediatrician is just going to get vaccinated. And they'll scare the shit out of you. They'll keep telling you that, like, if you don't vaccinate your kid, this is going to happen. That, and I saw that firsthand. And that's why I am so outspoken about, like, hey, these are my kids. They're unvaccinated. Yeah, you know how your pediatrician said that, like, how dangerous it was. These kids are healthy as a horse. Neither of them have are ever sick. They're they're cognitively there. They have energy. Here's an example. Here's an example of what happens when you don't vaccinate your kids.
Mhm.
Nothing. Just like if you do vaccinate your kids, nothing may happen. But understand that there are circumstances where something does happen. And that's the thing. Like, let people know that. Let people know that you can not vaccinate your kid and nothing can happen. And you can also vaccinate your kid and nothing can happen. There, there's possible risks in both regards. But they're not telling you that. What they're telling you is the only risk is you not vaccinating your kid. The only risk is you're putting your kid in danger if you don't vaccinate your kid. That's you being a bad parent. That's you risking them getting sick or whatnot. It's like that's why I think this issue is so important and becomes such an important issue, because one, nothing has been censored almost as more than the vaccine issue. And then also it kind of blends in with the censorship issue. It blends in with the big pharma issues. And I think today big pharma is probably our biggest threat to our own personal freedoms and liberties, because they have such influence on these politicians and on the media and everything else that I think a lot of people in the alternative media community that would have been talking about wars and geopolitical issues a few years ago are now much more concerned about the vaccine issue and the pharmaceutical industry issues that we have today with censorship and pushing drugs and pills on us and our kids. I mean, now they want to give kids drugs earlier and earlier. Oh, this kid has ADHD or ADHD. He has this, he has that. And, it's like, well, is there a natural
Restless
way?
leg syndrome, right? Whatever they can come up with to to give people a new drug or a new shot.
Create the disease, and then you can create the pill to give them for it, right?
Yeah. Like I think that's a huge problem with the media kind of being able to be kingmakers in terms of who the experts are, right? And like an example I like to use is the those America's Frontline Doctors. They were all over the internet talking about hydroxychloroquine for about 5 minutes until they got scrubbed from all the major platforms. And then I'm not sure if you've seen this part that so Squarespace kicked them off their website, right? They took them down, but then the CDC purchased americasfrontlinedoctors.org and redirects to the CDC website.
What the are you serious?
100, you could check it now. 100%. Yeah.
Holy
It's
shit.
like it's so subversive, right?
Oh my God. That's crazy. That it's
Yeah.
it's why, if they have PhDs, if they practice medicine, why the fuck is their opinion not as valid, or at least not worth listening to? I've said this to Dr. Scott Jensen, who's just on my show, and I've said it to Del Bigtree and a bunch of other people. It's completely acceptable for us to get a second opinion in real life, in your own personal life. If you get a second opinion for, because you feel like you're misdiagnosed or whatnot, it's completely okay for doctors to disagree. But in this issue, no, they can't disagree. We can only believe these doctors. Everybody else is a lunatic. It's crazy, and I mean, obviously the demon sperm thing did not help a lot. It did not.
Right. But they totally discounted the 11 other doctors there that are completely credible. And even like that Stella Emmanuel, man, like they're totally discounting the 350 patients that she's treated, probably more now, just because they found the one thing that she was preaching. And I guarantee if you went into any pastor's or preacher's place, you're going to be seeing similar things, right? Like they're going to be talking about biblical shit. It's nothing to do with their medical degrees. Like that just drives me insane.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It's nuts, man. It is. I mean, like I said, I think this is definitely one of the bigger topics and one of the biggest issues, especially when, like, Massachusetts, they just mandated the flu vaccine for kids going back to school or whatnot. So it's just like it's getting in your personal life. It's it's like what they used to say. It's like, you might not care about politics, but politics care about you. They get
Yep.
you can go along with your life, ignorance is bliss, and you think, oh, I could just avoid politics my whole life, and it's like you can't, because the decisions that are being made and the propagandas that are being pushed is affecting all of us personally.
Well, Ricky, man, I want to be respectful of your time, so I thought we could wrap it here. But thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It was a pleasure to get the chance to talk to you, and maybe you could just let everybody know where they could find you.
Yeah. So RV Theory 6, you can is my Instagram, Twitter. It's my YouTube channel, RV Theory 6. I know people ask me, they're like, why is it RV Theory 6 when it's Ripple Effect Podcast? Because I already had all these accounts when I started my music project. My music project was Theory 6, and that I actually wrote a song called The Ripple Effect, which ended up sparking the name for my podcast. So it kind of continues to be that. But it's RV Theory 6 everywhere. I'm also on Parler if you're looking for a alternative to Twitter that is, at least for the time being, unbiased. Or you can just search the Ripple Effect Podcast. It's also the rippleeffectpodcast.com. Where you can listen to it. It's on all platforms in regards to what you want, wherever you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, all those spots. So, and connect with me. I also have a Ripple Effect Podcast Facebook page, and I also have a personal Facebook page. If you want to connect with me, you can. Just throw me a little message. Let me know that you're not a robot or something like that, and we can connect. And I've been connecting with tons of fans and tons of listeners, and it's been really awesome to connect with people. And many of them are starting their own shows, which I'm getting a lot of interview requests, which I'm loving, because it's like, I know a lot of people feel like, well, what the fuck, man? There's already so many podcasts. Why should I start it? But there can never be enough. I told Charlie Robinson this because he was when he started his podcast, Macroaggressions, he's like, we need another podcast. I'm like, Charlie, I'm like, can never be enough of us when there's so many of them and they're controlling everything. I'm like, the more podcasts and more content out there, spreading interesting conversations, it's like the better, so everybody who wants to start a podcast, if you're listening to this, start one, and one of us will be your guest. We'll come on, right, and we'll talk to them, and
right.
and we'll help spark these conversations and really help mold people's perspectives, or if anything else, just be curious people asking questions.
Oh, perfect, man. Well, again, thanks so much for coming on the show. Thanks everybody for watching or listening. We'll catch you next time on the Paperboy.